So we've got, this is our Q&A time, and I don't know, for me this morning I woke up, I had a very full weekend, and I woke up and I thought, how on earth am I going to get through to tonight? All I want to do is go back to sleep. And yet I knew I'm sitting here and just listening to the presentation, listening to the talk, it really stimulates my mind, and I sort of feel like I've come more awake now. So thank you for that. I hope it's done something similar for you, and that you're got some questions. We have about 10 minutes for some questions. Yes.
I've got a mic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And maybe just state your name. And if it's particularly for one panel member, or that's okay, then I'll share the questions.
Good evening, my name's Josh. A question first for Abann. How can the New Zealand public listen to someone, or to a group of people that struggle to find a voice?
Can you repeat the question again?
How does the New Zealand public listen to a group that struggles to find a voice?
Thank you so much for the question. I think that's one of the thing we want to figure out for many years, and now we are in a better place to access some of the resources where we can team up with the media or organizations who can take it further. Because this is one of the things we say, that we can't do it ourselves. We need other genuine New Zealanders to join us, because this is not our own work. It's all New Zealanders that are in it. So we are looking forward to involve media company with us. I think around May, and then that will be public.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give you this.
Oh, okay. Kia ora. My name's Rhonda. Just going on from that, we're talking about people feeling heard. With the next step from that being what they're saying is actually being acted on. So how important is that, and how far away are we from that?
Okay. Do you want one of you to go first?
I mean, I can say something brief, but obviously I'm not from New Zealand. But in terms of what people can do, Dr. J, I don't know your last name, I'm sorry. I've been calling you Dr. J. I mean, he pointed out that we can vote. I really, it's important to realize that we have much more power than we think we do. Okay, my students say, the Amazon is burning and Australia is burning, and they get really apathetic sometimes because they feel overwhelmed. And this is an incredibly dangerous situation. We have to remind them not to get overwhelmed, to go out and vote right there in our context. Congress people, be politically active, show up for the demonstration. It's much more powerful than we think it is. It really is. I also like the Canadian model, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. That's when a sponsor family kind of wraps themselves around a refugee family and helps them. I mean, I think this helps the group do the intercultural journey that, on both sides. It helps very much. And I've heard that you tried it out last year with some good results. And I wish that we would do it in the United States.
I mean, I guess my response is, number one, if we even go back to your comment, Josh, I actually think that, and then it's Rhonda, right? Is that I actually think that that people from refugee backgrounds do have a voice. I've asked them in many studies. I did, think about my PhD. Like I asked, what is trauma, and they told me what trauma is, and I said, well, what do you think would help? And without exception, people just started rattling off ideas around things that would help them. It's not like they didn't have a lack of ideas. So it's not that they don't have a voice, it's just that they're not being heard. And so to me, then the issue is I was struck by Abann's comment, which said, how many people in here are from refugee backgrounds? And I was sitting in the front, I don't know. But, I actually think that this is something that we're all in this together. And the reality is that if we were to look at the global map around where refugees are coming from. Back in 2011, Syria wasn't even in the top 40. It was seen as a model country, very stable, and yet things fell apart very quickly. There's nothing to say that this couldn't happen in New Zealand. It just takes one crazy government, yeah? And things can turn around very quickly. And so it's about all of us working together. You know, for me, like using my privilege, there was someone that I knew that was about to be deported, and I was able to write a letter, and because I've got a PhD next to my name, for whatever reason, suddenly that carries more weight. Yeah? So it's about us using that's why I said mobilize our capital. What is your capital, and use it, make good use of it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
exactly.
Have we got we got a couple. I'll go to Hatch. Oh, okay. I'll go to Neil over there first. Thanks.
Is that on? Yes. Firstly, kia ora me tēnā koutou katoa and araho mai mo te kōrero I tēnei pō. Thank you, welcome, and thank you for the discussion this evening. It's been confronting, to say the least. In my role, I get to mix with lots of people from different nations, refugees, immigrants, people that have just, like myself, who have chosen to live in New Zealand. I come from Australia. I know it is incredibly hard to be a refugee in Australia and to resettle in Australia, and I hope that never happens here. It's one of the reasons I'm here. The thing that always surprises me is the congregation and segregation that refugees often find themselves in a position of, so that they mix, and this isn't a negative at all, but just by circumstance, they mix with language of culture groups, they mix with culture groups and people that they know who understand them. And I'm wondering how that can be broken down, not only from an individual level, but from a collective level as well. I have friends who are Kurdish. I understand their culture, they understand my culture, and in terms of manakitanga, we share our cultures together depending on where we meet and how that works. So that seems to me to be a really big barrier to break down, where we have ghettoized subgroups, especially out in South Auckland. So, does that make sense? I'm not sure if that makes particular sense, but just something that I've pondered on quite a lot.
Abann, you want to-
Okay, I can respond to that. Firstly, you need to have better understanding, because those where they come from, they leave their country of origin because they're looking for safety. They come to the country of asylum for safety, but they didn't find that safety. What they have found, human violation, they don't have a voice, they don't have even to access the normal basic human right. They not access that. So what has happened, many of them, they end up in a refugee camp or urban society. While they are waiting for the resettlement, then based on their experience where they are, when they arrive in New Zealand, for example, because you're talking about South Auckland, they have hope that New Zealand will give them what they were looking for all those years. Then suddenly they find themselves, they can't find a job, the language problem, no closer family to them, and most importantly, the children, they become a parents, and parents become a children. Just you think about that, someone who fell in this society, who don't have where he belongs. Because what's happened, human nature, you want to have a comfort where you can just fit in. So the other culture is not require qualification. It's require them to come, just come. You know English, you don't know English, you are welcome. That is one of the things that you see some of the people, they end up in that particular group.
I suppose my point was that I was, how do we collectively move towards a situation where we're enabling and empowering people who have come here as refugees to be able to have that interaction. So it wasn't any kind of slur on people living in this.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think some of the presentation that Sophia gave around actually what's the price, because I'm a grassroots up kind of person, that's always been my construct. And hearing that perhaps it's top down, it's got to be both, you know.
Oh, yeah, it's gotta be.
We 10 minutes fly by. Do we have any leeway, time makers?
One more question.
Maybe one more question.
Hatch had a hand up, but I know there's some over there. So if it's a short question, I'll be told off by the staff later and we'll go for it. So sorry, it was actually Hatch, she had it up before.
There you are.
Oh, no.
Thank you. I have a question with Dr. J. Thank you very much. I was very happy to hear that you distinguished resettlement and settlement process. Before coming to New Zealand, I associated with refugee work for many years in refugee camps as well, as a resettlement officer. Also, living in a refugee camp, we prepared refugees for resettlement. Now, I would like to ask you, what is the best way to actually give the assumption, change the assumption for the refugees? Because when I talk to people, what do you think about the refugees? And then I actually ask them to write one word in post-it, very negative. But as you mentioned, it should be positive. And how can we do that? I think that children can perhaps absorb it during the education. Do you have any suggestions?
Can we, to keep it short, can we take one suggestion from each of you?
I certainly have a longer answer that I'm not able to give. But I think probably a very short answer is that we need to get much better in our messaging around breaking down some of these assumptions about refugees. They're very powerful archetypes, and I think that the anti-immigration sort of right-wing type politics that we're seeing on the ascendancy in many places has a very simple and compelling message, and if we don't find ways to counter that, it's going to be an uphill battle.
In Greece, I talked to a professor, and he told me, a Greek professor, right? He told me that there's a Greek word for refugee that also means God, and that they believe that people that are coming into Greece for refuge are there's this historical meaning that means that they're deities, and if somehow we could reframe the whole notion of a person seeking haven in our communities as somebody special who can give us some new insight, that this would be very helpful. But I don't know if even the Greeks don't always mean God when they say refugee, so it's an uphill battle, really. Do you want to say something about that?
You need to change your mindset. Just come to AICC.
I'm going to, we hadn't heard from this room, and I know there's Jade and Marietta. I'm just wondering if you've got a similar question that we can combine. But let's. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Marietta, just very quickly. It'll be like a sprint along the.
A question to Jay. I was affected by the notion of moving from at risk to no risk, or to at risk. And some of the right-wing politics is really scaring the living daylights out of me. And I was wondering, we can have many of these conversations over many years, but how do we know whether we're having any impact? How do we know and measure whether we're shifting the dial?
Yeah, I think that's a really critical question. And I actually think that you're the wrong people I should be talking to, because actually most of you are probably within my network, So back in 2016, you would have looked at my Facebook page, my feed. I never would have guessed in a million years Donald Trump would have been elected, but that was the reality, right? And so we exist in these echo chambers that basically we're friends with the friends that we have on Facebook. Our Twitter handles are populated by people that share the same values as us, similar points of view, which means that important debate and conversations are just not even happening. So one of the things that I'm looking to do with this Rutherford Discovery Fellowship that I've got is I'm looking to try to map these networks. And what you actually find is that, generally speaking, we'd be this little network. There's another network probably across the street that's probably talking about things that we're not very happy about, right? And probably most of us don't overlap. But it might be that someone in here, maybe Jade, or I don't know, probably not Jade, but someone in here is connected to that group, or at least has some forms of trust. And that can actually be your bridge where they might be tweeting about the right-wing stuff and then something else. And if you can identify who those players are, and there's now tools that you can do that, that's your point of intervention to actually disrupt those echo chambers.
Just to clarify, definitely not a Donald Trump fan.
Thanks, Jade.
Thank you very much. Can we have a big round of applause for the speakers, please?